Imagine this. You're in a crowded room. Maybe it's a work meeting, maybe it's dinner with friends. The atmosphere is light, people are talking, and then out of nowhere, someone throws a jab. They say, "You're arrogant," or maybe, "You're selfish, manipulative, fake." Suddenly, all eyes turn toward you. The moment feels longer than it really is. The silence after the words is heavier than the words themselves. Your body tenses. Your mind scrambles. You feel the pressure of judgment, of needing to clear your name, of proving you're not what they just accused you of being. And what do most people do in that moment? They defend themselves. They say, "That's not what I meant," or "You misunderstood me," or "No, I'm not like that at all." It feels natural. It feels like the reasonable, fair thing to do. But here's the question: does it actually work? The truth is, it doesn't. In fact, defending yourself rarely convinces anyone. What it does, instead, is shift the balance of power. The moment you explain yourself, you've accepted their framing. You've admitted that their words have authority, that they matter enough to force you onto the defensive. And once that happens, they own the narrative. Even if you're right, even if you're innocent, you still look guilty because only the weak rush to explain. Machiavelli understood this centuries ago. He knew that power isn't about being liked or even being understood. Power is about control, control of perception, control of the frame, control of the story that people believe. And when you defend yourself, you give all of that away. Think about the most powerful people you've ever met or seen. They weren't the loudest. They weren't the ones desperately trying to prove themselves. They were the ones who could sit still, calm, unbothered, who could let an accusation hang in the air like smoke without rushing to clear it. Their silence made people second-guess themselves. Their stillness made people uncomfortable. And in that discomfort, power shifted that's the Machiavellian trick: never defend yourself. Because the one who defends lowers himself, while the one who doesn't forces the world to defend him. And that is how you flip the power instantly. In this video, we're going to break this idea down step by step. First, we'll look at why defending yourself is almost always a mistake. Then, we'll explore how silence, strategic, deliberate silence, can become one of the sharpest weapons in your arsenal. From there, we'll uncover Machiavelli's techniques for reframing accusations, turning every attack into a collapse of your opponent's credibility. Finally, we'll talk about what happens when you go beyond silence, when you cultivate an aura so strong that accusations die before they even land. By the end, you'll see why the people who defend themselves are forgettable, but the people who refuse to explain, those are the ones who become untouchable. Let's begin with the most brutal truth. Defending yourself makes you look weak. Now, that might sound counterintuitive. After all, we're taught from a young age to stand up for ourselves, to clarify misunderstandings, to make sure people know our true intentions. But the reality, the Machiavellian reality, is that defending yourself doesn't convince anyone. What it really does is signal to the world that you've already lost the upper hand. Think about it. The very moment you start explaining, what are you really admitting? You're saying, yes, your accusation matters. Yes, you have the authority to put me on trial. Yes, your judgment is valid enough to force me to respond. And once you do that, you've already given away the frame. You've stepped into their arena, playing their game, under their rules. Take the workplace, for example. Imagine you've just pitched an idea in a meeting. One of your colleagues leans back in their chair, smirks, and says, "I don't know. That strategy doesn't seem very well thought through." Everyone in the room turns toward you, waiting to see how you'll react. The common response: to lean forward, defend the idea, pile on reasons why it actually makes sense. But what happens? In that instant, you look rattled. The attention is no longer on your idea, it's on your defense. And whether you realize it or not, you've validated their criticism by scrambling to answer it. Even if your explanation is flawless, even if you're objectively right, you've already lost in the eyes of the room. Because here's the Machiavellian law. Only the weak rush to justify themselves. And this isn't just in business. It happens in relationships too. Your partner says, "You don't care about me anymore." What's the instinct? To immediately say, "Of course I do. Let me explain why. Look at all the things I've done for you." But all that explaining doesn't heal the relationship. It actually feeds the emotional frame of accusation. It shows that the words hit you, that they carried weight, that you felt compelled to fight them. Instead of standing firm, you've given your partner the power to dictate the terms of the interaction. Now let's take it into the digital world, social media, the online arena. Somebody leaves a comment. You're toxic. You're manipulative. You're fake. If you rush to write a long reply to set the record straight, what happens? Do they suddenly change their mind? Do the thousands watching suddenly respect you more? No. In fact, the opposite. You look like you're scrambling. You look desperate to be understood. And in the court of public opinion, desperation is weakness. This is why Machiavelli warns so sharply. He who explains, submits. Because the very act of explaining is an act of submission. It shows you've accepted their authority. You're reacting to their move instead of making your own. And in power dynamics, the one who reacts is always beneath the one who controls the frame. Let me ask you something. Have you ever seen someone accused of something, and the more they tried to deny it, the guiltier they seemed? It didn't matter that they were telling the truth. Their frantic explanations made them look cornered, like an animal trying to escape a trap. That's the curse of defending yourself. It never really clears your name. It only magnifies the suspicion. Meanwhile, think about the opposite kind of person, the one who doesn't defend, the one who lets the accusation hang in the air like smoke, without blinking, without flinching, without chasing anyone's approval. What happens then? The crowd starts to doubt the accuser instead. They think, wait, why isn't he reacting? Is he above this? Did that jab just fall flat? Did the attacker overstep? In that silence, the power shifts. And suddenly the accuser looks insecure, emotional, maybe even jealous, while the one under attack looks untouchable. This is the Machiavellian lesson. Most people defend themselves because they want clarity. They want to be understood. But clarity doesn't give you power. Control does. And control isn't about proving your innocence. It's about making others question themselves that the first step is this. Stop chasing approval. Stop rushing to explain. Because every time you defend yourself, you shrink in the eyes of others. But every time you refuse to, every time you hold your ground in calm silence, you rise. And the higher you rise, the harder it becomes for anyone to touch you. That's why defending yourself doesn't just make you look weak, it makes you weak. Because weakness isn't about whether you're right or wrong. Weakness is about who controls the frame. And the one who explains has already lost it. Now that we've seen why defending yourself makes you weak, let's go deeper into the Machiavellian countermove, the art of silence. Silence is not absence. Silence is not weakness. Silence, when used correctly, is a weapon sharper than any argument. Because here's the paradox. When you don't defend yourself, when you don't explain, when you don't even flinch in the face of accusation, the burden shifts. The spotlight no longer burns you. It blinds the attacker. Picture this. You walk into a room and someone throws shade. Maybe it's subtle. Oh, he always has bold ideas. Not sure they're practical though. Or maybe it's direct. You're arrogant. You think you know everything. Everyone in the room turns to you, waiting for your response. The natural instinct is to fight back, to explain, to prove them wrong. But imagine instead that you say nothing. You don't smirk, you don't twitch, you don't even blink. You simply let the words hang in the air, unanswered. What happens? Silence starts working its magic. At first, it feels uncomfortable for everyone. People expect a defense. They expect a counterattack, but instead, they're left with a vacuum. And human beings hate a vacuum. They rush to fill it with assumptions, with doubts, with questions. Why isn't he reacting? Is he above this? Did that attack just bounce off him? Did the accuser go too far? Suddenly, the silence isn't yours, it's theirs. They're the ones now explaining, fumbling, filling space. And with every word they add, they weaken their own position. Machiavelli understood this long before modern psychology gave us the language to explain it. He knew that the one who speaks first often loses control of the frame. The one who stays quiet forces everyone else to reveal their emotions, their insecurities, their desperation. Silence, in this sense, isn't passive, it's pressure. It forces your opponent to keep talking, to overplay, to unravel themselves, while you stand perfectly still and think about how people actually perceive silence. When someone defends themselves, the thought is, he must have something to prove. Maybe he's guilty. But when someone stays calm, detached, and silent, the thought flips. Wait, does he know something we don't? Is he too powerful to care? Is this accusation beneath him? The silence builds an aura, a presence. It suggests strength without you having to say a word that you've seen this in action. Think of a powerful leader, a CEO, a military commander, or even just someone you respect personally. The ones who truly stand out are rarely the loudest. They're not the ones scrambling to explain every move. They're the ones who can hold silence like a weapon. The ones who let a pause linger just a little too long, making the other person sweat, making the room lean forward, waiting, wondering. That's not weakness. That's dominance. Now, let's take this to relationships. Say your partner tells you, "You don't care about me anymore." Most people panic in this moment. They rush to reassure, to defend, to list all the ways they've shown they care. But when you do that, you've already entered their emotional frame. You're reacting to their storm, not controlling the tempo. The Machiavellian move is different. You let the accusation hang. You hold the silence. And then, calmly, you say something short, grounded, and detached. That's not how I see it. No panic. No justification. No explaining. Suddenly, the drama collapses. They feel their own words echo in the silence. They start questioning if they overreacted. Because in that moment, you controlled the emotional tempo. And whoever controls the tempo controls the power. It gets even colder. Silence can extend beyond words into absence. When someone tries to bait you, insult you, or drag you into conflict, sometimes the strongest move is not only to stay quiet, but to disappear, to not respond, not acknowledge, not even give them the dignity of a reply. What happens then? They spiral. They start posting more, talking to others, trying harder and harder to provoke you. And the harder they try, the weaker they look. Because every attempt exposes their obsession, while your silence remains unshaken. This is why Machiavelli saw silence not as passivity, but as strategy. Silence makes your enemies unravel themselves. It makes bystanders question the attacker. It flips the frame without you lifting a finger. So here's the lesson. Silence isn't just the absence of speech, it's the presence of power. When used deliberately, silence forces others to dance around you, while you remain the still point at the center. And in a world obsessed with noise, explanation, and validation, the one who can hold silence instantly commands respect. Silence is powerful, but Machiavelli knew something even colder. Sometimes silence alone isn't enough. Sometimes the most ruthless move isn't just refusing to defend yourself. It's taking the very accusation hurled at you, twisting it in your hands, and handing it back like a mirror. That is the art of flipping the frame. What does it mean to flip the frame? At its core, it means this. Never fight inside the world your enemy has created for you. When someone attacks you, they're not just throwing words, they're setting the terms. They're saying, this is the battlefield. Here are the rules. You're on trial. And if you defend yourself, you've already lost because you've accepted their premise. But if you flip the frame, the trial ends before it begins. The accuser becomes the accused. The audience shifts its gaze, and the game is suddenly yours. Let's ground this in reality. Imagine you're at work. You've just shared a bold idea, and someone across the table smirks and says, "Well, that's ambitious, maybe a little reckless." Most people would lean forward, rush to explain why it isn't reckless, why they actually thought it through. But the Machiavellian doesn't play that game. He leans back, he pauses, and then, with calm detachment, he says, "Funny how caution always disguises itself as wisdom. What just happened? You didn't defend your idea. You reframed the entire comment as fear disguised as intelligence. Now the accuser doesn't look clever, they look timid. And the room sees it too. You flipped the frame. This works everywhere. Someone says, 'You're arrogant.' The defensive response is, 'No, I'm not arrogant. I'm just confident.' But confidence doesn't need defending. The flip is simple. Strange how confidence makes people uncomfortable. In one sentence, you've transformed arrogance into proof of strength, and their accusation into proof of insecurity. Or they say, 'You're manipulative.' The defensive move? Denial. The Machiavellian move? Only people who can't be influenced say that. Now they're the fragile one. Now they're the insecure one. You didn't just neutralize their attack, you weaponized it against them. This is what Machiavelli meant when he described the turn of the blade. You don't block their sword with a shield, you let them fall on it themselves. You use their energy, their words, their attack, and you twist it until the weight is theirs to carry, not yours. And here's the psychological truth. People hate being exposed. When someone attacks you, they're usually hoping for a fight. They want you defensive. They want you scrambling. When instead you turn their words back on them, you're not just avoiding the trap, you're reversing it. Now they're the one flustered, explaining, backpedaling. And remember, explanation equals weakness. The more they explain, the more guilty they look. Think about it in social settings. You're at a party and someone jabs at you. Well, I guess being humble isn't really your thing. Everyone laughs, waiting for your reaction. The weak move is to laugh nervously, to explain you were only joking. The strong move is to pause, let the room hang in silence, and then calmly say, "Interesting take." Or even colder, "You seem emotional tonight." Suddenly the laughter dies. The jabber looks small. They fidget, they backtrack, they try to explain, "I didn't mean it like that." But it's too late. You flipped the frame. The spotlight is no longer on you. It's on them. Online, this becomes even sharper. Picture a comment thread. Someone writes, "You're toxic, manipulative, dangerous." The weak response is a paragraph of justification. The strong response is a single line. People always call you dangerous when they can't control you. Now the accuser looks bitter. You look untouchable. And the audience? They see strength, not defense. Because you didn't argue, you elevated. And history is full of these examples. Leaders who didn't just ignore accusations, but transformed them into badges of honor. When opponents called them ruthless, they framed it as strength. When accused of ambition, they reframed it as vision. And in every case, their enemies fell into the same trap. They over-explained while the leader owned the frame. This is why flipping the frame is so deadly. You don't just dodge the blade. You make your enemies stab themselves with it. And you don't need long speeches. You don't need explanations. You just need precision. Short, sharp lines that reveal the attack for what it really is. Insecurity, weakness, fear. Remember this. In the game of power, the words themselves don't matter nearly as much as the frame. Who's calm? Who's rattled? Who's explaining? Who's setting the terms? And Machiavelli knew that whoever owns the frame owns the outcome. The next time someone accuses you, don't step into their world. Don't play defense. Flip it. Make their words a mirror and let them collapse under the weight of their own reflection. So far, we've seen two Machiavellian moves: never defend, and when needed, flip the frame. But there's an even colder tactic, one that doesn't just neutralize accusations, it turns them into undeniable proof of your strength. This is what we can call Machiavelli's reversal. The idea is simple: don't just refuse to defend, use the accusation as evidence of your power. Instead of denying it, you make it a reflection of the accuser's weakness. You don't run from the label, they hand it to you, and you wear it like armor. Let's break this down. Imagine someone calls you arrogant. The defensive move is to insist, "I'm not arrogant, I'm just confident." But that's still a defense. You're still playing their game. The Machiavellian reversal is to say, "Strange that confidence makes people so uncomfortable. What just happened? You didn't deny the accusation, you inverted it. Now arrogance isn't a flaw, it's evidence of strength. And their attack? It's exposed as insecurity." Another example: someone calls you manipulative. The weak response: "No, I'm not. You're misunderstanding me." The reversal: "Only people who can't be influenced say that." Instantly, the word manipulative stops being a weakness and starts being a sign of control. You've turned their accusation into your weapon. And here's the psychological beauty of this move. The moment you reframe an accusation as a strength, the attacker is left holding their own poison. They wanted you to squirm, to deny, to fight back. Instead, you agreed in a way that made them look foolish. You've taken away the sting. You've made them question themselves. And often, you've made them look petty in the process. Machiavelli understood that the game of power isn't about being seen as good. It's about being seen as untouchable. And untouchable doesn't come from being pure, clean, innocent. It comes from being so composed that even accusations bend in your favor. This is what he meant by the turn of the blade. You don't meet the sword with a shield. You let your enemy strike, and then you twist the blade until it cuts them instead. Every accusation becomes weight they can't carry. Every jab becomes a mirror of their own insecurity. Let's imagine this in a social setting. You're at a group dinner. Someone smirks and says, "Wow, you always act like you're smarter than everyone else." The defensive response: "No, I don't. I just..." The Machiavellian reversal? A pause, then, "Interesting how confidence unsettles people." Or even sharper, "Maybe I just don't think like everyone else." Now the crowd isn't laughing at you. They're watching your accuser fidget, scramble, try to backtrack. Their jab has become their embarrassment. Or consider the online battlefield. People leave comments, accusations, entire posts designed to bait you. The average person writes long clarifications, emotional replies. But the reversal is a single line. People always call you dangerous when they can't control you. Now the insult has become a crown. They look bitter. You look untouchable. And your silence in the face of their spiraling only reinforces it. The deeper psychology here is fascinating. When you deny an accusation, you validate it. You admit it. Carried weight. But when you invert it, you reframe the entire narrative. Instead of playing defense, you project strength. And strength, even when feared, commands respect. This is why Machiavelli would smirk at the idea of proving your innocence. To him, innocence is irrelevant. Power is perception. And perception isn't shaped by facts. It's shaped by the frame. If people believe your so-called flaws are signs of strength, then they are. Think of history's most infamous leaders. They were called ruthless, cunning, manipulative, ambitious. And instead of running from those labels, they used them. Ruthlessness became decisiveness. Cunning became strategy. Ambition became vision. Their enemies thought these were attacks, but in time, they became part of the legend. That is Machiavelli's reversal at its highest level. Here's the key takeaway. When someone accuses you, don't argue. Don't deny. Don't defend. Reverse it. Make their words a mirror of themselves, or even better, make them a badge of your strength. Turn every insult into a crown, every jab into proof that you're untouchable. Because once you learn to reverse the blade, something strange happens. Your enemies stop attacking, not because they like you, but because they realize every strike only makes you stronger. And that's when you've mastered the reversal, when you no longer need to fight, because everyone knows they'll lose before the battle even begins. So far, we've been looking at Machiavelli's ideas and principle. But theory is one thing. To really understand the power of never defending yourself, we need to see how it plays out in the real world, at work, in relationships, and online. These are the arenas where power games are fought every single day, often without people even realizing it. Let's start with the workplace. You're in a meeting, presenting a strategy, a pitch, or an idea. Someone interrupts. "I don't think. This plan is very realistic." Now, most people's instinct is to defend. They lean forward, rattle off details, try to prove that yes, it is realistic. But notice what happens. The room sees a shift. You're no longer presenting with authority. You're scrambling to justify. Even if you're right, you've lost presence. The Machiavellian operator does something different. He leans back, not forward. He pauses. Maybe he lets the silence stretch just a little longer than feels comfortable. And if he speaks, it isn't a defense, it's a redirect. Something like, "All right, let's hear your strategy then." And suddenly, the spotlight flips. The one who accused now has to perform. The room evaluates them, not you. The accuser, who expected to look clever, is now under pressure. And you? You've preserved your composure, and maybe even grown stronger in their eyes. This same dynamic happens in personal relationships. Think about the accusations that come up in moments of conflict. "You don't care about me. You're always so selfish." The average person reacts instantly, emotionally. They explain, they defend, they list all the reasons why that isn't true. But what does that really do? It validates the emotional frame. It says, yes, you get to define me. You get to be the judge of my love, my care, my intentions. And that puts you in the weakest position possible. The Machiavellian approach is colder, but far more powerful. You don't panic. You don't explain. You let the words hang in the air. And then, calmly, you respond with something detached and final. "That's not how I see it." No drama, no justification, just calm certainty. And suddenly, the energy shifts. Your partner begins to feel. Their own words echo. They start questioning their tone. They wonder if they overreacted. Because in that moment, you weren't pulled into their storm. You controlled the emotional tempo. And whoever controls the tempo controls the frame. Nowhere is this more obvious than in the digital arena. Online, accusations and callouts happen at lightning speed. Someone comments, "You're fake. You're toxic. You're manipulative." Most people can't resist replying. They write long clarifications, trying to clear things up. But the longer the explanation, the guiltier they look. And in the court of public opinion, looking guilty is worse than being guilty. So what's the Machiavellian move here? Silence, or even better, reframing. Imagine responding not with defense, but with one sharp line. People always call you dangerous when they can't control you. Now you haven't defended yourself at all. You've flipped the accusation into a badge of power. Your critics look bitter. You look untouchable. And the audience watching from the sidelines begins to question who's really in control. That isn't damage control, that's narrative dominance. Think about how powerful this really is. In business, silence and redirection force others to reveal their weakness. In relationships, calm detachment controls the emotional frame. Online, reframing transforms attacks into proof of your strength. Across every arena, the principle is the same. Don't defend, dominate the frame. And once you master this, something strange starts to happen. People become cautious. They hesitate before attacking you, not because they like you, but because they know it won't work. They know every jab will either die in silence or bounce back as their own embarrassment. You've shifted the power dynamic entirely. This is why Machiavelli's principle isn't just theory. It's a survival skill in the modern world. Because whether you're climbing the corporate ladder, maintaining a relationship, or navigating the chaos of social media, one truth always holds. Defending yourself lowers you. Flipping the frame raises you. And the one who controls the frame controls the outcome. We've covered silence. We've covered flipping the frame. We've even covered reversal. But there's one level above all of these. A point where you no longer need to silence your enemies because they silence themselves. A point where you no longer need to flip the frame because the frame bends around you. This is the final evolution. This is aura. Aura isn't about what you say. It's about what people feel in your presence. It's the energy you carry into a room before you open your mouth. It's the reason why some people can walk in, sit down, and instantly the tone shifts. Conversations quiet, eyes turn, people second-guess themselves. And all of this happens without a single word. That's aura. Machiavelli understood that power is perception. And perception, once solidified, becomes aura. When people believe you are untouchable, you don't need to prove it. When people fear provoking you, you don't need to defend yourself. Your reputation itself becomes the shield. Your very existence becomes the defense. Think about the rare figures in history and even in your own life who had this effect. They weren't the ones constantly talking, clarifying, explaining. They weren't desperate to be understood. They were the ones who said very little. And because of that, every word they did say carried weight. Their silence didn't just protect them, it elevated them. It created mystery. And mystery, in the human mind, is almost always filled with strength. Because here's the paradox. When you leave a gap, people don't assume weakness, they assume danger. If they don't know what you're thinking, they imagine the worst. If they don't know what you're capable of, they imagine more than you actually are. Silence doesn't make you small. It makes you larger than life. This is where aura lives. Aura is built in the spaces you don't fill, in the accusations you don't answer, in the bait you don't take. Every time you refuse to defend, you add another stone to the fortress of your aura. And eventually, that fortress becomes so strong that people stop testing it. They stop attacking, not because they've decided you're innocent, but because they know every attempt will backfire. Think about how this feels in a group. You're at a gathering. Someone makes a joke at your expense. Instead of laughing nervously or snapping back, you pause. You hold their gaze just a moment too long. You say nothing. The room shifts. The laughter dies. Suddenly the joker is the one under pressure. And everyone walks away remembering not the joke, but the stillness. That is how aura is created. Not in words, but in presence. And aura isn't limited to face-to-face encounters. It translates online, too. The figures who appear untouchable on social media are not the ones constantly arguing with critics. They are the ones who don't respond at all, or respond so rarely and so sharply that when they do, it shakes the room. Every comment, every post feels deliberate. They don't play defense. Their silence creates myth, and the myth becomes aura. Machiavelli would argue this is the highest form of power, because once you've built aura, you don't need to defend, flip, or reverse. The mere possibility of your response is enough. People hesitate. They censor themselves. They weigh the cost of speaking against you, and often decide it isn't worth it. Here's the truth. Strength still flinches. Strength still fights back. Aura doesn't even need to acknowledge the hit. Strength wins arguments. Aura ends them before they begin. And when you reach this level, your enemies stop seeing you as a rival to defeat. They start seeing you as a wall they cannot climb. That is the final evolution. To live in such a way that your silence speaks louder than any defense, and your presence carries more weight than any attack. To cultivate an aura so strong that people stop questioning you, not because you explained yourself, but because you never needed to. And once you reach that point, you'll understand what Machiavelli meant when he said, "It is better to be feared than loved if you cannot be both." Aura is what makes that possible. Aura is what turns silence into legend. Aura is the invisible crown that makes you untouchable. We've walked through the entire playbook, from silence to flipping the frame, to Machiavelli's reversal, and finally to the creation of aura. But now let's bring it all together. The instinct to defend yourself is natural. It's human. From childhood, we're taught that if someone misunderstands us, we should explain. If someone attacks us, we should fight back. If someone questions us, we should prove them wrong. But as Machiavelli revealed centuries ago, that instinct is a trap, because defending yourself never convinces the accuser. It only convinces the crowd that you've already lost. Think back through the examples. The coworker in the meeting who expected you to scramble, the partner who wanted reassurance, the online critic desperate for a reaction. In every case, the one who defends becomes smaller. The one who refuses to defend becomes larger. And that's the paradox most people never see. The less you explain, the more powerful you appear to Oh, what's the path forward? It's simple, but not easy. You have to retrain yourself to resist the urge to justify, to hold still when every nerve in your body wants to react, to let silence burn, and then, if you choose to speak only with precision. And over time, each moment of restraint builds something far greater than defense. It builds aura, because the end goal here isn't just to win arguments. It isn't even to survive accusations. It's to reach the point where your presence itself is the answer, where people stop attacking, not because they believe you're innocent, but because they fear the weight of your silence, where your name carries respect not because you fought for it, but because you never needed to. Machiavelli would tell you this: the man who defends himself lowers himself. The man who doesn't rises above. And the one who rises above long enough, consistently enough, becomes untouchable. That's the final transformation. The next time someone calls you arrogant, selfish, manipulative, fake, remember this. You don't need to prove them wrong. You don't need to chase innocence. You don't need to play their game. Let the silence do the work. Let the frame bend back in your favor. And let your aura speak for you. Because in the end, power isn't about being understood. It's about being untouchable.